Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 65th edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, recorded here in northwest central London, just off historic Abbey Road. And we hope everyone out there is feeling good. And there's a lot of tension out there in the world today. We just want everybody to feel good. And remember, the rock and roll is there to save your life. And that's why our show concentrates on classic rock, hard rock, prog rock, heavy metal, and early MTV, everything that we grew up with in the United States. But we get the different UK perspective. Now that I live in the UK, I can get a little bit more of the history over here. I can interact with some UK rock fans and see what their perspective is. It's always a little bit different than your hometown perspective. And Jackson and I, my co-host and partner Action Jackson and I, we're kind of Anglophiles when it comes to our rock music anyway. All of our favorite bands, generally speaking, over the years have come from England. And that's one of the reasons I was so psyched to move here and be able to spend a little time here to see some of the classic venues and hopefully get to see some of the bands. Now, COVID's kind of put a monkey in that wrench. But things are now starting to open up, and as of this week, we're going to stop self-isolating when people get COVID. And we had a member of my family get it, and they were fine. We're over it now, so hopefully we're going to be able to move forward. And going to concerts again is going to be part of our normal life once again, which is very exciting for me. And this week we are going to feature an English band, one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time. And that's Iron Maiden. We've done a few shows on Iron Maiden. Our Live After Death show is one of our most popular shows. We've also reviewed Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son of the Seventh Son as we were working our way up to the release of Senjutsu last year, which is, of course, an incredible double album by the band. But this is the 40th anniversary this year of Number of the Beast, which is big for so many reasons. It's one of their very best-selling records. It's also the first one to feature Bruce Dickinson on lead vocals. Paul Di'Anno had been bumped out, and they brought in Bruce Dickinson, which is a huge, huge, huge upgrade. His powerful and operatic vocal style really changed the game for Maiden and really opened up a lot of what they could do. And of course, Steve Harris has famously been kind of a prog fan, Genesis, Yes, and some of those early prog bands. You can start to work more of that into the songs because of Bruce's range and his ability to command the stage. It really just changed the game for Iron Maiden, sent them to the stratosphere. And it's hard to believe that Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast and The Prisoner and Hallowed Be Thy Name, all those songs are turning 40 this year. So we thought this would be a great time to sit down and have a talk about this one. Also, if you heard our 48th show, which is a review of Who's Next, you heard me talk about being able to see Bruce Dickinson live in his speaking tour. And Jackson had the opportunity to do that as well here very recently. So we're going to start off with his experience seeing Bruce live and hearing Writing on the Wall through the big speakers there. And then we're going to dive into the album review. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we want you to download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can always tweet us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. DM us. You can let us know which albums, which bands, which concerts, which DVDs, which rock properties you want us to review. And we've got some good interviews coming up I think that you're going to like. So stay tuned for that. But let's go ahead and dig into this one. This is as classic as it gets. It may not have been as big in America as it should have been, but it really started a fire around the world to announce the presence of Bruce Dickinson and that Iron Maiden was now one of the premier hard rock bands in the world. It's the review of Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden here on The Wolf. So tell me about Bruce. I mean, obviously I got to see the show in the fall and we did a show, or at least half a show, about it. But this is also kind of your first time with the live audience in a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. The place wasn't super packed. It was a cold night in Jacksonville, but there were enough people to kind of get that crowd experience. I don't think Bruce would have cared if 2 people were there. He'd have gone out and done his thing. I think he could be what they call in your neck of the woods a presenter on TV. He's just got the energy and the vibe about him that he's just excited to be there. He's jumping around on stage. He's telling stories from when he was when he was just first like kind of going to school up until, I mean, pretty much, well, he went through the whole cancer diagnosis, and
Right.
that kind of got to be a heavy duty part of the show. But no, it was great. I loved it. He was talking about the first band he was in with the kids at school, and going through Let It Be. I could do this. I mean, let it be, let it be, let it be. I can write lyrics like this. But then he was playing the bongos in the band, and then the singer was like, I need a double on this. So he started singing, but he really started singing, and you could tell, I mean, the crowd went nuts when he did that. Just to hear that voice was really cool. No, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I did have a little bit of a bone to pick with part of the show.
Okay.
A quick thing that he said. He mentioned he had pictures of himself through the years, and he was talking about his pants and how ridiculous they were.
Sure.
And one of the things was the Somewhere in Time outfit.
The lizard
where
pants.
He had the lizard pants with the ridiculous, like, over the top pirate shirt. But he was, he's like, oh, some may remember this from Somewhere in Time. And we had been out on tour for the World Slavery Tour. It had taken a long time, and I was exhausted. So I kind of took a step back from that record, and that's why you don't see anything from me on there. I was just kind of taking a break. That's not the story that I heard, Bruce. I heard that maybe you had written songs for that, and they just didn't want them. So, but you know what? We're all here to have a good time. So, and actually, that was my question that I wrote to him. So I'm glad he didn't say anything. I said something about how, like, hey, I know that you wrote songs for that. Did you use them somewhere else? Did they come? That didn't come up, though. So,
well, yeah.
I said he's telling that story. I'm like, I hope he lost that question, because that could be a sore subject.
Well, and I do believe that some of the questions they're not fixed, but he will definitely take questions from the audience, but there's some that you're going to get every night, so they might flip through until they find those, or they might just stuff the deck so that after he does a couple of actual audience questions, then he can get to the one with a little sticker on it that says, who is the craziest member of Iron Maiden? Oh, well, that's Nico McBrain. And then he can do his Nico McBrain soliloquy. I mean, did he do that whole story on Nico this time?
Which one did you hear? Did you hear the one about the plane going to Jersey, I think?
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, he did. But it actually sounded like a real question, because it was, how does it feel to play with the world's greatest drummer? And I'm like, I could see somebody asking that, but you're right. He's got to have the Nico question so he can talk to him and do the, right, what's that?
Right.
The part in the middle where you play, oh, you mean the bum part? Yeah, that's it. Play it this way. Yeah. It was a great show. It was interesting. It was interesting to hear about the Samson days, because that was kind of like when he really got into being a professional musician. Like, he was talking about the band that he was in before that, playing some rat hole club. And the Samson guys come and say, hey, we want to offer you a job. And he was like, yeah, I'm pretty good about loading, the stuff in and out of the van. No, we want you to be the singer. Oh, but it doesn't pay that well. It pays?
Right.
Let's go. So, yeah, it was a great show. I liked it. They played the writing on the wall in the intermission.
Right.
They put
the video and everything.
With the sound effect. That sound. He's like, you've seen this on YouTube. This is going to sound a lot better. And it totally did. It was full blast, and it was great to see that. I mean, it was like 2.5 or 3 hours long. It could have gone longer. I mean, he could still be there talking. I would listen to him for hours and hours and hours. Just a great storyteller. I know that it was a show. Like, it's not, but he kind of did it in a way where it was almost like he was kind of thinking of these, like, oh, here's another great story. Like, I know it's a script,
right,
but still, it was very off the cuff. It didn't seem super rehearsed.
Yeah, no, he's obviously a great entertainer. He's been doing it at a high level for decades now.
Yeah.
And he has done some TV presenting, I think, some history or like history of aviation kind of stuff and that kind of thing. He is a polymath. He can do all sorts of very complicated and complex and hard to master things. He's an amazing man. And that's why when the opportunity just to see him speak came along, I jumped at it and said, of course I would love to do that. And then when I saw he's coming not only to America, but to your area, I'm like, Jackson, you gotta check this out. You're going to love it.
It was close. The place was nice. It was kind of an old, I don't know if you've ever been to the Florida Theater before in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I saw Foreigner there without Lou Graham.
all right. I mean, it's a cool venue. It's small. It's kind of intimate. So I mean, I liked it a lot. I mean, again, he could have gone for another hour and a half, and I would have been just fine with that.
Yeah, and I think what it really does kind of tell the story of his life. It doesn't get too into the weeds on the Somewhere in Time album, I did this and sang this, or
Yeah, no.
even when he said, okay, I kind of took a break from it. You're right, kind of in retrospect, that's probably his position. He probably tried a bit, but he didn't have his best with him at that point, right? He was depleted. Okay, so then he wrote some songs, but they weren't up to snuff, and you can just sing. That's what we'll do. We've got songwriters in the band. You can sing these songs. And then on the next album, Seventh Son, and we did shows on both of them last summer. I think shows 38 and 39 or something like that. We're on Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son, where we kind of go in depth on all that. That was kind of leading up to the release of Senjutsu and eventually me seeing him live and now you seeing him live. So again, that's cool because yes, there's going to be some variance in the show, but it's like we got to see the same show even though we didn't get to see it together.
Yeah, and it was cool to be that close. And just, you could tell that even though you knew this wasn't going to be an Iron Maiden show, he wasn't really going to sing. Did he sing Revelation at the end?
Not really.
Intro to it?
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was just cool to hear him sing. But I know that's the closest I'm ever going to get to, see him physically close. Like, if you go to see an Iron Maiden show, you're going to be 300 rows away. And you kind of really don't want to be that close with fire and explosions in the back. You want to be – somebody told me they saw a Kiss concert real close, like first or second row. And, like, you can't – like, it's cool, but you can't see anything. Like, you can't see what's the show going on in the background. Like, you just – so that's kind of the same way with Maiden. But, yeah, I just really enjoyed the performance. I enjoyed the people looking at me like, you're going to go do what? He's going to sing, right? No, he's not going to sing. He's just going to tell stories. And you're going to sit there and listen to that? Yes, I am. And I'm going to be enthralled.
Yeah, I remember
– just a dude who's lived an amazing life. Mm-hmm. I know one of the questions – I don't know if this is a planned question or not, but it was, when is Iron Maiden going to retire? And of course he triumphantly yelled never. And so everybody got, super psyched about that. Yeah. Well, and I can see that. I mean, obviously if they haven't quit now, I mean, there's no reason for them to stop. There's still a huge draw in most of the world, maybe not so much in North America, but, or in the United States.
Right.
But all over the world, they can play sold out shows. Why wouldn't you?
Well, yes, you're right, but now they're in their early 60s, which is not a death knell for being a touring rock band. But could they do the same show in their 70s? Probably not. Yes, they've got a lot of props to help them, but could they all run around the stage and perform that way once they're that old? Because I've obviously seen musicians who play in their 70s, Mick Jagger being the glaring, outlier who can still run around and do all that stuff. But most people, even if they've got the chops to play, they're not moving around and covering the stage and all that. So no, I don't want them to retire ever, but I can see a day where it's not that easy to pull off an Iron Maiden show anymore. And the fact of the matter is, in their 60s, there aren't that many people who could do what they do now.
Right. And I guess the other thing, too, is, you get to the point where maybe you've got one or two guys who want to go on and everyone else is like, you know what? Yeah, it's a lot of time to be on the road, especially something like Dave Murray. I kind of live in Hawaii where it's super nice. And
I play golf all the time.
I don't know if I really want to go touring the world again. So, yeah, I don't know. How does that work when it's like, oh, it's two of the members of Iron Maiden and a couple of other random 20-year-olds? Like, I don't know about that. But I just like the sentiment of we'll never retire. And they're getting ready for, to go back on the road. So who knows what's going to happen. But, yeah, I'm glad I went and saw the show. Great show. I would, if he had something else, like a different version of that, I'd probably go again.
Yeah, I hear you. And, of course, now that Riding on the Wall is such a big hit, even though they're kind of still obligated to do this best of or legacy of the beast kind of tour, they're going to have to play that one. They're going to have to fit that one in because, well, they just want to. They want to play their new cool song, and people obviously love it. I also saw something, I think it was Bruce maybe in an interview saying they'd like to play Senjutsu in its entirety, which would be an undertaking. I mean, they don't play much more than an hour and a half anyway these days. especially in the States, they kind of tend to truncate their show just a little bit. So if they just did Senjutsu, it would be like Senjutsu and then maybe 2 other songs in an encore, maybe, right? But they wouldn't do all of that for Legacy of the Beast. But I don't know, so they've kind of got these obligations to fulfill that they couldn't do before COVID. But now they've got this killer new album that people are dying to hear stuff from. So we'll see how they thread that needle, how they burn that bridge. Hopefully this summer, at least if we can't see them, we'll hear all about it. I'm not a festival guy, Jackson.
No.
I want to go see an Iron Maiden headline show where it's just them.
Yeah, because I think the problem with those festival shows is that, well, first of all, there's a billion people there.
Yeah.
So, but then also that's going to be a short set because they've got so many other bands. That, I think, to me, that's the big thing is, if I'm going to go, I want to see the full show with all the props and the stage and not a light version of it.
Yeah, and I saw him on Ozfest one year, and Sharon finally realized that Ozzy can't sing on back-to-back nights. He can't do that, and they booked a lot of Ozfests on back-to-back nights. So every time there was a second night right afterwards, Iron Maiden stepped up to be the headline act. But they didn't play for an hour and 45, 2 hours. They went from playing like an hour and 5 or an hour and 10 to beefing it up to maybe an hour and 25, hour and 30. So even then they weren't necessarily, and that was 2004, 2006, I can't remember when that was, long time ago at this point. But even then they didn't do that. So I don't know. I know that they still have, like you say, there's great demand all over the world that they want to play live, that Steve Harris is a never say die kind of guy. As long as Harry wants to do it, I think they'll continue. Obviously, if something adverse were to happen to him, I think that would shut the whole show down.
Yeah, I don't think you can go on without him. One of the questions was, why do you play UFO at the beginning of the
Doctor?
Kind of the intro? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's Steve's favorite. He wanted it, so there it is. I'm like, okay. So basically, Steve Harris calls pretty much all the shots.
Steve still runs the show. He always has,
Correct.
And he always will. And he's got a hell of a work ethic, so let him do it, man. I mean,
because then he does the British Lion shows. I'm like, you're not on tour enough. You're like, oh, I can't wait to get off tour so I can go on tour with my other band. What? Okay. Yeah,
the quantity and quality of output from Iron Maiden and Steve Harris over the years, to me, is unrivaled. And I think it's him and obviously Rod Smallwood, their manager, who was probably in the building that night with Bruce, the two driving forces in Maiden to keep them going these recording more than 40 years, but 45 years. I mean, I think it was 76 that Steve kind of founded the band.
Yeah, it's amazing. But although I was thinking about that, like there weren't a ton of people at the show. It was kind of an off, Jacksonville's not the biggest place on the face of the earth, especially for metal music. But then I was thinking, like, what's your overhead there? Like, I mean, he went out there, you need a projector and you need a stool to put your beer on. And that's it. I mean, there's probably one other guy with him. There isn't a huge stage show. So, I mean, let's just do this. You just go out there and entertain who's there and go on with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad you got to see that. And I encourage anybody out there who has a chance to go see Bruce Dickinson on his speaking tour, definitely do it. He's an amazing entertainer. He has fantastic stories. He's an actor. I mean, he could have been a stage actor or a movie actor if he really wanted to be. He's quite the personality, quite the character. And I desperately hope, I can't believe you've never seen Iron Maiden live, man. It's more than a bucket list thing. That has to be like your personal quest.
That's why I'm really hoping that this summer they announce some other dates over there other than the festival stuff.
Yeah, I hear you.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and we can segue a little bit on this one because in 1982, Iron Maiden was the opening act for one Judas Priest on their Screaming for Vengeance tour. But you know what was released 40 years ago yesterday, as we're recording this, Jackson, was Run to the Hills, the single off the album before the album came out, which came out in March of 82. But February 12th is when Run to the Hills, the single, hit the world, introducing Bruce as their singer.
So they had a thing about, it was a classic albums deal with Number of the Beast, and they were talking about the original Iron Maiden and how they were really kind of more of a punk band. And so they were showing clips. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Di'Anno definitely had the punk look. With
the voice was more
jacket.
punk with Di'Anno for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were an Iron Maiden fan in 1981 and they dropped Run to the Hills on you, did your head just explode? Like, this is just the next level.
Well, yeah, or, and then the other stuff to obviously come on the album, like the Hallowed Be Thy Name. Like, do you think Paul Diano could sing Hallowed Be Thy Name?
No.
No. It's impossible in some of this stuff. But, I mean, yeah, the thing, they were coming out of a time where it was punk and metal was coming back, and obviously they were too good at their instruments to just be a punk band.
Right.
and Steve Harris is writing more complicated stuff, like Phantom of the Opera on the previous album. That's a very proggy, like killer old school Iron Maiden song. They knew they needed to upgrade, and getting Bruce Dickinson in is, my God, it may be the greatest upgrade. I mean, this is not before you get famous. Sometimes they change people before they record, and it doesn't really count. But I'm talking about after you've released records and then you bring somebody new in. Is Bruce Dickinson the greatest upgrade to any band ever?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about that. But yeah, you're talking about where they came from and where they were going would end up.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I think they knew that too. And I think, because remember we watched that what was that, 12 Wasted Years?
About 100 times, yeah.
Yeah, and they had the interviews with Diano, and basically it was, you can't really argue that. Listen, dude, you maxed out your potential.
Right.
You're a great guy. For what we did at the beginning, you were the dude. They were saying he was just he's just like kind of a gangster dude. Like he just kind of wanted to, play shows in a club, get drunk, probably get into a fight, and then sleep it off the next day.
Right.
And the rest of the guys, especially Steve Harris, was like, no, we need to go to the next level. We want to take off and be a giant band all over the world.
Yeah, Steve Harris, just the walking embodiment of something with an incredible work ethic and ambition to go with it. He single-handedly for 45 years taken on Iron Maiden. Yes, Rod Smallwood has been a big help, and he's been there pretty much the whole way. But the creative force and the driving force is Steve Harris. He's the boss. He's the man. And look, this is their third album, kind of a breakthrough in that, yes, it introduces Bruce, but this is only Adrian's second record, and he's his first writing credits, right, on this one. So he's starting to find his place in the band. Although I think Clive Burr was quite good. This is his last record with the band, and Nico will be in for Peace of Mind. So Steve Harris wasn't like, okay, we got a record deal, let's just keep this band intact. When he sees the opportunity to upgrade, or that someone isn't making the cut, like Dennis Stratton, I think was just starting to get a little behind in his ability versus someone like Adrian, So that's, I think Steve just took his opportunities and he kept moving the rock up the hill, right?
Right. And I think he saw something in Bruce. And even there was a comment from Bruce about how he was watching Iron Maiden thinking, wow, if I could be in that band, we could really get something done. And I think he realized the songwriting acumen of Harris and those guys. And yeah, they could really come together. I think Samson, they must have had a hit or two somewhere. And
here, yeah, they did. They never did any damage in America. The only reason I know Samson is because Bruce Dickinson used to be in Samson.
Right. I think that's really the only reason that they haven't just been lost to time. Yes. It's interesting though about how Steve Harris is he's English. So, he's just kind of not a weird, but an odd duck. Like if you didn't know who he was, first he's kind of now he's a 60-something-year-old guy with shoulder length hair, but
and some tattoos. He's a bit of a geezer, right?
Yeah. But if you didn't know who he was, he's just very quiet and very reserved. And he even said, yeah, when we got done with that record, we didn't know what we had. We knew we had a solid record. We liked it, but this giant, massive hit, it was just what we did. We just put out the next record. So even it was probably mid 90s when this thing came out, the documentary.
Oh yeah.
He was still very humble about it. Not like, we knew what we were doing. We were going to be the biggest. Just real reserved.
Yeah, he's a down-to-earth guy who just works his ass off, tries to make everything, no matter what he's doing, as good a product, as good experience as he can make it. He's so good to Iron Maiden fans. Iron Maiden fans are the luckiest in the world because they get the coolest stuff from their band, right? They get forget about the music. They get the coolest T-shirts, the coolest album covers, the coolest designs, the coolest stuff comes from Iron Maiden, man, as far as marketing goes. And being a fan club member for years, it's like, I can't believe they still do this. And they still do it so well. It's so much better than everybody else.
Well, even look at now. They put out the writing on the wall, right?
Man, yeah.
And so they put out a video for it, which was cool. And then somebody said, "Hey, it would be a lot cooler if you put in a whole bunch of sound effects." And they said, "Okay, here you go, bang!" And they played that at the Bruce Dickinson, the evening with Bruce Dickinson.
Right.
And it sounded amazing
so
on
cool.
a professional sound. But,
oh
it's
God.
one thing you hear it, you hear it on headphones or, you hear it whatever. But I mean, to hear it in a giant like auditorium with a professional set, that was really cool.
It was great, wasn't it? They're going to play it.
That was the break too. And people were, I'm like, don't get up. This stay for the whole thing. I'm like, I'm going to go get a drink or something. You're missing it. Stop it.
Oh, no, it was great, man. That was so cool. And they're going to play it now. I mean, even though they got to do Legacy of the Beast.
Oh, yeah.
They have to work it in. It's part of the legacy now, man.
Right. They said something too about that when they toured for this record on some parts in the United States. They were on a bill with, now hold on, let me remember. It was Foreigner, Loverboy, Ted Nugent, and Iron Maiden.
What?
Now, I don't know what you thought you were getting when you bought that ticket, but wow, that was all over the map. I don't know what promoter thought that was a good idea. Yeah, sure, just come on. Just throw them on there. Right. Anybody who loves Loverboy is going to love Iron Maiden and vice versa.
All right, so see, here's part of why America doesn't love Iron Maiden the way they should, okay? Because obviously somebody in America didn't really know how to promote them, as an opening act. Now, I do think they opened for Kiss some,
okay.
They've opened for some, big acts, but that in particular was just... That sounds wrong to me. But then Smallwood, eventually did it so that they're running the show for themselves. And, of course, that's what worked long term. And it's where we got, the World Slavery and the Live After Death tour and everything, because they were headlining. But so that's part of it. And then part of it was because this is Number of the Beast. You're talking about 666. Then the Christians are going to take the albums and burn them, or they're going to smash them because they don't want to smell the fumes of the satanic, records they burn.
You don't want to get that inside of you. Yes, no.
Hey, as long as you bought them, guys.
That was my thought. Yeah, you know what? Smash up as many records as you want. Just keep going back and buying
them. Yeah, exactly. So that was negative press. So then they weren't big on MTV. They didn't fit in with the MTV image of like Men at Work and Duran Duran and the Michael Jackson and those kind of bands on there. So they were trying to make themselves a little high end, cutting edge, and like that's dirty metal. We don't know what that is anyway. So we never. So that's our main form of consumption, right? Didn't hear them much on rock radio. Never saw them on MTV, and I didn't even know this song till later in life. But I'm glad we found it eventually.
Yeah, and the other thing I love too is they made two videos. They made Run to the Hills and they made Number of the Beast. Now, if you watch them back to back, they're wearing the same outfits. Yeah,
it was shot on the same day. The same
Correct.
Day.
So
you
know they were just. This isn't like some artist. This is like we pounded out one, bang, right into the next one. Should we, do a cut? We don't even have any more clothes. This is it. This is all we've got. Get out there and do it. And yeah, to your point, MTV was not going to play. There's a scene in Number of Beasts where they have the dancing. And as they twirl around, they actually have 666 on the back of some of the people. Right. Yeah, that's not going on American TV.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. The Heartland just wasn't ready for it.
No.
So we were denied a little bit. So then it becomes, all right, well, then you got to find a friend who's going to introduce you, right? You need an older brother, right. You need a cousin, you need a buddy at school, whatever it is, to kind of get you into them. But so this album is... It's kind of amazing. They say it may have sold as many as 20 million records around the world. Although in the first year, did it go over 2 million or 3 million? I don't know. It's like it's been a pretty steady climber. And I think they do a lot of reissues and things like that. And it continues to sell.
Yeah. And in thinking about that too, in the 80s, like especially, 81, the intro part there, you couldn't even have this thing around. It was one thing like if you had a record that had crazy stuff on it, but the album cover was, it was kind of innocuous. You could have, if anybody saw this, they were like, what is this horrible thing
I know
that you got? And I guess the deal was that the original artwork was for Purgatory, the single Purgatory. Yeah. And they were like, no, this is way too good for just a single. This has to be the album artwork. And yeah, it's horrendous. It's fantastic now, but I can imagine, suburban moms in 1981 having strokes. If you had this and, maybe the poster on your wall, now you were definitely headed down the wrong path.
Now, first of all, the Derek Riggs artwork here is brilliant.
Yep.
For those who don't know, Number of the Beast, and it's got the devil with a marionette Eddie, but then above the devil is an enormous Eddie marionetting the devil. But then I think there are even strings coming out of Big Eddie going, up into the sky maybe. So it's like we don't even know who the evil one is. Where does the evil come from? We don't even know. But it's a heck of a work of art. You're right about the artwork. I remember I had the Led Zeppelin Swan Song basically labeled in color. I had a poster of that on my wall in high school. It's got like the angel and with the wings. And if you notice, the angel doesn't have any junk, right? This was offensive to my mother. She's like, what's wrong with him? He doesn't have any of his parts. I'm like, well, Mom, if I got pictures like that on the wall, I'm a little more different than even you thought I was, okay? I don't want to see that.
It's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And then she didn't like the poster because he didn't have his junk. But I think she still liked it, but I don't think she would have appreciated Iron Maiden at all. No. Especially, no. I was young when this came out, 1982. I was not yet 9, so I'm not going to have this on my wall. And when I see it in the record store, I'm just going to walk past it really quickly. If I'm with my mom, I don't want her to see me looking at it, right?
Right. I think this is probably one of, if not the most classic cover that they ever put out, just because there's a lot going on, and it's the classic Eddie look. And the longer you look at it, you see the more stuff in it too.
So would you rank it? Would you rank it over Power Slave? Would you rank it over Somewhere in Time?
I think so, but I'd probably put this one number 1. I'd put Somewhere in Time number 2, but Somewhere in Time is the intricacy of that one.
And the front and back gatefold, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the whole thing. But yeah, I just love this one because, well, you know what? No, I take it back. This is number 2. Number 1 is Killers. The number 1 is Killers because it's so horrible to look at. It's fantastic. And to me, that's like, the first one was kind of like, you tried it, okay.
Right.
But Killers is where Briggs really came into his own as far as creating this thing. And that's the other cool thing about the band, too, is they always had this phantom third party that could do all of these things that the band never could. And Harris even said at one point in time, I wish you could do the interviews and then I wouldn't have to. So just have, like, you're creating this fantasy world that people really keyed into.
Yeah, and
they still do today.
Right. I mean, at least the Iron Maiden lettering has been consistent throughout. Mm-hmm. And it's iconic. It's so cool, too. I mean, it instantly. Iron Maiden font,
right.
And every record, everything, every T-shirt, it always looks like that, for 40 years plus now. But
it still looks cool today. There's a lot of stuff that came out like a while ago that you're like, oh, that looks dated now. This still looks cool today. The font and most of the album covers look pretty cool today.
Yeah. And so this is the first one with Bruce. Last one with Clive Burr on the drums. But the kind of classic lineup that goes from Peace of Mind through Seventh Son, which includes Live After Death, of course.
And I think one of the guys who doesn't get enough credit is Adrian Smith. I mean, Harris is the main driving force. He writes most of the songs, including most of the epic ones. But Smith really, when they got him in to start writing songs, they definitely took on a whole new layering of what he could do. And as far as his guitar playing, I think both he and Dave are massively underrated. I think they kind of there's so much going on that the guitar work kind of doesn't get put front and center like a lot of other bands.
There is a lot of individual talent on every track, on every instrument, right? So I hear what you're saying there. I think as a duo, they're unbelievable. And I think that Adrian, in some ways, I bet, you know what? I can't say he's better. I guess he's my personal preference. I like his style more than Dave's. You could argue both either way. I know they both have their own fans. To me, getting Adrian in the band is a huge, huge deal for Iron Maiden.
That would pay off until he left the band. I mean, every single record that he's on
is awesome.
After this one, and he's got songwriting credits on it. It's not like he, I had a couple on one record and that was it. No, he's a constant force, and then he leaves and comes back right back into it again, writing songs until this day.
Well, and so I mean, I guess at least half or maybe more of these songs they had played a little bit live because, they were just working their asses off back in the day, right? They make a record real fast, they go tour the hell out of it while they're trying to write new songs, and then when it's time to make another record, they go in and do it. So in the studio, I think they only maybe wrote 2 or 3 or something like that. Okay. So they played some of these and rehearsed them, and it needed to fix some up, or, sometimes they evolved out of something else. So they had probably played some of these with Di'Anno. And I think it shows, especially on the first track, Invaders, which I think came out of an older song, Invasion, that they had been playing earlier. As good as the record is, I think this is a little bit of a clunker. It starts off really cool. It's got some kind of sick bass and good Clive, opening strong and fast, but the song is not great. And you're introducing Bruce now, right? It's like, we're not the punk band. We've got this new dynamic voice. But this, to me, is obviously a song that was written with kind of Paul in mind. Okay. And it's like, why are you showing this off? I know it's fast and you got some sick bass work on there, but it's a little weak. And I think Steve Harris ended up agreeing with me. He's like, we should have replaced that with something else, but we didn't have anything else to replace it with.
Well, that's the part. I mean, they had spent so much time with the content for the first 2 records. Yeah, I mean, this was kind of like you had to write new stuff, and then if you've got something left over, we can't have 4 tracks on this. What else have you got? Well, we've kind of got this, and let's rework it. But you're right. In listening to it, it's Bruce's voice, obviously, but it's not his style yet.
Right.
Yeah, and there's a couple, at least 1 or 2 more like that on here too, where it's like, oh, that's the old style, not the new stuff yet.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I understand is Bruce actually was pretty involved in writing several of the tunes, including like The Prisoner and Run to the Hills and stuff like that. But because he was still attached to Samson contractually, he could not write music with Iron Maiden because they still owned his songwriting rights, I guess. So even though he was writing a co-writer on a bunch of these with Steve and Adrian, he doesn't get credit.
Yeah, I saw that note too, and I would say, oh, well, that's convenient that you're saying, oh, I wrote these too. But I mean, the stuff that he wrote after that, I have no problem believing that he contributed to them.
Exactly.
And it's interesting too, because Harris was saying something about how like the stuff that you see that's just Harris, stuff he writes himself, and he's like, it takes me like 5 or 10 minutes. I kind of put something together, and then like he just has these ideas in his head, and then they kind of bring it to the studio and put it all together. But to think about that, like, it's just the wheels are just turning in your head all the time, and you come up with it. Like you came up with that in 5 minutes. That just the intro or the genesis of the song, it's pretty incredible.
He's an open channel, man. When it comes to him, it comes to him. And I think he reads a lot, and maybe you get on a certain topic or a certain time in history or a certain idea or a story, and it gives you an idea. And then you've probably got bass lines running through your head anyway. So pick one of those and stick them together and, see what the story is. Yeah. But so Invaders, it's kind of, I mean, look, it's fast paced. I think Cliff Burton probably heard this as a young guy and not quite in Metallica yet, and thinking, I can do that. That's cool. But I don't think that the lyrics aren't real good, and it doesn't really showcase Bruce.
Right, but it is a good way to start the record. I mean, it throws you right into the deep end as far as the pacing. It's real
a charger.
Fast.
That's for sure. And so I know why they picked it first. It's just not that great a song. However, I think the next song is a great Iron Maiden song, man.
Well, here's the thing that I don't understand. Well, it's not that I don't understand it, but come on. So you're putting out a record called Number of the Beast. The second track is called Children of the Damned. I mean, people are going to be upset with this. You just know it. So come on. But yes, this is a great track.
And you can hear Bruce holding the notes, in a way that Di'Anno can't do, and that whole that he does at the end. Paul Di'Anno's not going to sing like that, it's slowed with some power chords, but then it builds up into kind of a traditional Iron Maiden thing with a little hammering. I heard Dickinson said it was inspired by Children of the Sea by Sabbath.
I thought it was. I don't know. I think there was a movie, Children of the Damned, and that was part of the genesis for it. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be. I mean, you never know what you listen to one thing and it translates to something else in your head.
So, but on this song, I have to give a shout out to our boy Mike.
All right.
Mike, who loved Iron Maiden, was a decent guitar player and taught us about a little bit of Maiden, shared some of that with us. And he, God love him, he was such a metalhead and like a rock and roll kid that like in the 6th or 7th grade or something like that, he had an assignment where he was supposed to go read a story in the paper and then write a poem or write a song or something about it. You know?
Uh-huh.
And there was a thing in the paper about like these kids that were burned or something like that. There was a fire and these kids got burned. And so he basically lifted the lyrics of Children of the Damned for a middle school English assignment.
Could you imagine that because he was like from Ohio or something, right?
Yeah, outside of Cleveland, Akron, yeah.
Yeah, this poor middle school teacher who's, okay, children, turn in yours. What is this? Oh, I think we've got a very big problem with this child.
Well, I think he had to read it in front of the class. And I'm like, well, what did they do? It's like, well, they just kind of looked at me. Are you sure?
911.
Oh my goodness, that's a great personal story. I hope you're listening, Mike. We love you, man.
This is Neil from Def Leppard, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast.
Moving on from Mike's favorite, it's The Prisoner, and this is a killer fun Iron Maiden track, man. This was on.
Yes.
They showed this on 12 Wasted Years, and I remember seeing this and thinking, now that is cool, but not half as cool as the story from Rod Smallwood getting McGowan to give him permission, man.
Yes, and I guess this was a big. I mean, I'd never heard of this show until I started listening to this record, but I guess this was a really big show in the 60s or the 70s.
In England, yeah, and in the UK,
yeah.
And I mean, absolutely. Patrick McGowan's a big star, yeah.
And I guess they said they didn't know this, but he owned the rights to the whole thing, so they had to go straight to him to get the permission.
Yes, I mean, when we're talking about folks like at the beginning, there's a TV series starring Patrick McGowan called The Prisoner, and at the beginning, Iron Maiden has some samples like, "You are number one, who is number six? I'm not a number, I'm a free man," and you had to get. You had to get McGowan's permission, so Smallwood has to call him up, and he's pretty nervous because he knows rock stars, but he didn't know any like Hollywood stars. So he's got to get Patrick on the phone personally and say, "Hello, I'm from a band called Iron Maiden." And he's like, "For a rock band, what's the name?" He's like, "Well, it's Iron Maiden." And McGowan goes, "Right, do it." And I'm like, "That's pretty cool. That's a great story, Rod."
But what I didn't know too is that he made that call in front of the band, like they were all in the same room, and they're like, "You're messing it up," because I want to do this song about a prisoner TV, and they're like, "No, say it right, you're screwing this up." Yeah, and then he's just like, "Do it." And so yeah, it's cool because it's got the spoken word intro, and then the drums at the beginning are they're not real fast, but they're real heavy.
Heavy, yeah.
Just that like bashing into this thing.
So do we know why Clive left? Was he a problem off the court or something? Because it seems like he was delivering pretty well through the first 3 albums. It wasn't like he was bad.
I think that's might have been what it was. Maybe he had some problems that would cause him to not perform well. It's a classic, I think he's running late, and then we don't know where he is. Because apparently they said when they started this track, he wasn't around. Like he was off somewhere else, and it's like, okay, it's time to work. Come on, get in here. So I don't know that for sure. That's just what it seemed like to me, because you're right. He's killing it on this record.
Yeah, man. The middle 8 is so cool with the guitar and the drums together. And the dueling guitars, it just makes it a really hot one at the end. I'm like, I think it's a killer song. And yeah, his drumming through the middle is really good. And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't think they kicked him out because he didn't have the chops. It must have been something else. But
right, yeah, it had to be. And then what I find interesting too is the whole notion of, I guess Bruce said this
Mm-hmm.
resonated with him, this TV show. Does that have something to do with growing up in England? You go to the Rush subdivisions where it's just like, you're in this lane in your life and you want to break out and do something else, and you don't want to get shoehorned into a certain, you're born here, here's your job, here's where you retire, and here's where you die, and it's kind of already predetermined. Was that a big hit in England because people don't like that way of thinking?
Classism, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great tune.
And it's cool too because the chorus is a little more radio friendly too.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's I don't know why this wasn't a bigger hit on the radio.
Well, yeah, for whatever reason. Well, I mean, they only did really two singles, right? And they didn't really track. And they're pretty good songs, and they didn't really track that well in America anyway. So, plus they were ready to move on and get to Peace of Mind, which we will get to probably around this time next year when it turns 40.
Nice.
Now, 22 Acacia Avenue. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take you to 22 Acacia Road.
Oh boy.
Because St. John's Wood tube stop is on the corner of Finchley Road and Acacia Road.
Okay.
And I remember when we first got here, we're starting to look around for places to live, and I walk out of there, and I'm like, we're on Acacia Road, on potentially this tube stop where I'm going to live and get in and out of every day. This is a sign. And we did not move far away.
So this was an old Urchin song.
Yeah, it's kind of part two of Charlotte the Harlot, I guess.
And I guess they kind of Adrian brought it in, and they kind of just reworked it. They gave it the Iron Maiden touch.
Yeah.
If you actually listen to the whole thing, it's pretty brutal. It is a pretty brutal song about the world's oldest profession.
Yeah, it's maybe a bit long for a song about that.
Could be.
It gets a little proggy. Almost at points because it's getting long. They're having some time signature changes there. I mean,
well, I know that Steve did point out the fact that he was a big in addition to being a Sabbath fan and all of those, Deep Purple, he was a big, Genesis fan, Yes fan from back in the day. So yeah, I mean, there definitely is some in Steve Harris. There is some proggy tendencies that can come out every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because it's this proggy song about den of ill repute. The thing is, every street here, you don't have streets like in America, you might be number, 2832 on your street or something like that for whatever reason. Everything in London starts at 1 and goes to the end of the street, right? So there's going to be a 22. I thought Adrian had a nice solo. Look, there's some bits to this song that are pretty cool, very Maiden-y, taking it to that next level, but it's not my favorite on the...
Yeah, this might be one that its time has come and gone for enjoyment.
Yeah, but that's side one. Side one has no singles, although I do think those two songs, Prisoner, Children of the Damned was never going to be a single with a name like that, but it's got some good stuff in it. But the Number of the Beast, well, that's a single? Why not, right?
So, in going back and listening to this again, this could be the best song they ever put out. It really could be. It's phenomenal, and it was born to be played live too.
It is a great runner, right? I mean,
so you get the intro, which I guess they originally wanted Vincent Price to do, but he wanted too much money.
Of course,
and that would have sucked because then he went and did Thriller. And that would have been like, oh, it's the same guy. And I don't know who does it. I had the name here a second ago, but now I lost it. But it's just, it's very, it's more proper, the way that he's doing it, not like Vincent Price. But it's another one of these songs where it has the intro enough where you can turn the volume up as loud as it'll go. And then it starts off, slow, boom, 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 and then it builds into that scream that he does. And I was telling my son, so you got to understand, like when they do it live, it's the scream and 15,000 pounds of pyro just blowing everything up.
That's right.
Where you can feel it on your face, and it's just then it just goes. It's like you're on a roller coaster, like you're just going, and now we're full speed into this, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, big Roger Daltrey, yes, yelp, scream. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's one that I've seen them do enough. If you've never seen them, yes, I can understand you want to see them do that on Legacy of the Beast tour, and I would like for you to. Absolutely. They can replace that with something else for me because I've seen it. I don't know how many times I've seen Maiden, 6, 7. I try to count it up sometime. But it is a classic, and it's just Number of the Beast. Because they were doing this with the satanic theme, a lot of odd things were happening in the studio and around them at this time. Like
dun, dun, dun.
Equipment was breaking for no reason, and lights were going off at odd times. And of course, there's the almost unimaginable story of Martin Birch, their producer, their longtime producer, getting into a car accident, runs into a van, or the van hits him, and it's a priest with a bunch of nuns in it. And he's like, oh, God, this is weird. And then he has to get his car to get fixed, so he takes it in the shop, and the guy gives him the bill, and it adds up to 666. Now, that sounds totally made up, but they've all stuck to it all these years. And of course, he said, look, you can charge me $670, you can charge me $700, all right? I'm not paying that number. Make it $660. I don't care what. It's not that. Do you believe it?
I mean, it's almost too insane not to believe. And I would think at this point in time, if there was a crack in that story, somebody would have just said, you know what, yeah, we made that up a long time ago. But they all swear it's the gospel truth. And you can have the stuff in the studio happen. Okay, lights go off.
Right.
Things make sounds, they fall. It just happens all the time. But that story with the whole, it's just way too right on the mark.
I know.
It's insane.
That's why I'm like, it makes for a great story, and we want to believe it. Martin's not with us anymore, so he may be the only one who knows the truth. No, it's Number of the Beast, classic runner. Lead solo was great with Steve. Steve's basically soloing too.
Yes,
it's kind of it's pretty amazing what he does.
And the other thing is about that, I was thinking about that show where they were talking about the classic record, the parts in there where Birch is sitting in the studio and he's dropping out parts. Like, here's just the bass harmonics, and then you add this part, and then you add this part. I'm like, I really wonder how that would sound without Steve Harris. Like, it would be totally different.
Oh, yeah.
Just if he just had the regular, no offense to anybody else who plays rock bass, but like that dude, like just thumping along. His bass part is as much of the song as anything else.
It holds it all together. It's driving it forward. It's what everybody else is keeping up with, basically. Especially in the songs he writes, which is most all of them. I mean, it's all of them with co-writes on half of them on this record.
But I think, too, part of it was that people took this, according to Harris, they took it the wrong way. Like, no, we're not Satanists. No, we don't worship the devil. I had a really bad dream one night. He references that Tam O'Shanter poem by Robert Burns where the guy, he's, going home and he runs into the devil on a dark and stormy night.
Right.
It's just about being afraid. I think that's what it is. And that uncontrollable, like when you're afraid, like there's nothing you can do about it. You're just afraid and it sucks.
Yeah. And it's, is this some kind of crazy dream? Like This isn't really happening, right?
Yeah.
Which is a theme that comes up, in other songs, maybe Hallowed Be Thy Name, comes up again a lot on Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the whole record, it seems. So, kind of part of it. You follow that up with Run to the Hills, which was the number one single released 40 years ago yesterday as we record this, man.
Yeah, and this is another one, too, where it's kind of cool because it's I wonder how the rest of Maiden would have sounded with Clive because Nico, he's a great drummer, but he puts in a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of stuff going on. I may have mentioned this before, but Tommy Lee refers to him as an octopus. Like, you think there's no way one person can make that many sounds at the same time, whereas Clive is more straight down the middle. And this is a really cool, it's not easy, but it's not overcomplicated, the intro, and you know what it is. And then the riff starts. And then I think this is the classic, like if you talk about what's the Iron Maiden Gallop? Like if you heard that, okay, just listen to this song. That's what this is. This is the beginning of it. Yeah.
That's exactly my notes. And this is the most classic runner. There's the Gallop right there, and the chorus is totally Iron Maiden.
Right.
Yeah. This is quintessential Maiden. Again, it's so much fun to see live. Again, for me, because I've seen it live enough, I could see something else, a deep track. Like, I'd rather see The Prisoner than this because I've seen it so much. But if you only get to see one Iron Maiden show, you're going to want them to play this one, I'm pretty sure.
And that's why I wonder, too, if you were waiting for the new Maiden single. Okay, I can't. It's coming out. I know they're going to drop it. Here it comes. This isn't like anything you've ever heard before. And this one really showcases Bruce's voice.
Really does. But I think Clive does well here because all the little parts that sounds like something Nico would put in, but that's Clive on there. So again, I thought he does good. And the fact of the matter is, the next song he actually gets a write on. He gets a writing credit, first writing credit he ever gets. So I think Steve was sick of his nonsense, is what it kind of boiled down to.
And they had made. There were comments made about how, when it doesn't have to be the same band the whole time, when you get a part that's not working so great, you can change it out. They were talking about, at this point in time, they were talking about the Di'Anno to Bruce Dickinson, but give it one more record, and you're going to swap out Clive for Nico, who was already in the Iron Maiden world. Famously, he's the devil that would jump out on stage and do some other stuff too. I think he did some work as the Eddie stand-in. So he was there hanging around, and I know they were friends with him.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it too. They knew, there's this other guy who's also a drummer hanging around. Does that lead to tension? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, once you've got someone to replace him, it makes it a lot easier to replace him. Right. That's for sure.
But I thought on this track, this is another one that sounds a lot more old school Iron Maiden.
Yeah, I see. I agree with you there. I mean, it sounds a lot different than most of the stuff on this album, the stuff that we kind of get to know Iron Maiden for. Now, he co-wrote it with Adrian, and there's some good drumming from him at the start, but there's no Harris bass at all, so it just doesn't sound like Iron Maiden.
Right. I would be very interested as to how this thing came to fruition, because you don't see, because usually it's either Harris and a couple of people, or like later on it's going to be Dickinson and Smith that write the song. This is a weird combo. I don't know how this thing came to light. Well,
and the fact of the matter is, I think it was down to between this and Total Eclipse to be the B-side of Run to the Hills. One's going to be the B-side. One's going to be on the album before Hallowed Be Thy Name. And they just made the wrong choice, because Total Eclipse is kind of a cool song. It's a little different too. It sounds like it could have influenced Metallica. It sounds like those guys heard this song, something up, big changes in the middle, and some great vocals by Bruce. So, I mean, I think they made a mistake. I think they should have done it the other way, put Total Eclipse on the album, because Bruce sounds great on it, and then because this sounds like it could have been a Di'Anno song to me.
Well, so here's the deal. So if you look at Wikipedia, and you look at obviously this is all it's done by different people. Total Eclipse is Harris, Dave Murray, Burr. Okay,
right.
That's what it says. But I'm looking at
nice.
I think this is a 1998 remix of this, or reissue.
Yeah.
This says Total Eclipse is Harris, Di'Anno, and Burr. So you're right. I would go by what they put out. So yes, this is an old song that they not recycled, but put together and repackaged and put out. So that makes a lot more sense to me.
Well, so if it's Di'Anno, maybe you don't put it on the album.
Right? Yeah, originally that's maybe what that was. That you kind of wanted to, and then who knows? Maybe he's like, no. Here comes a lawsuit or something saying I wrote that part of that song.
Yeah, but it's still a B-side of the single,
right?
So he's getting something there, but let's keep it off the album. I think that probably had as much to do with it as the sound of it. It's not like either one of them are fantastic. I think Total Eclipse is better, but that's probably what did it at the end of the day. Yeah. But then you end with an epic, colossal, fan live favorite, Hallowed Be Thy Name, man. This is Iron Man, and this is proggy, if you don't mind my saying. I mean, because of its length, because of its time changes, because of the heaviness of the nature of the subject.
So that's where you get into the beauty of Iron Maiden is got all of these songs from all of the albums that they put out, and this one, it's at the end of the album. It's almost 7.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
And you'd think, well, there's no way they play live. They play live all the time. It's always in their set. That's the deal. They love this. This was the foreteller of things to come with Seventh Son, with Power Slave. This is what we're going for. These epic deals.
Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I mean, it's
correct. Yeah. If you're a fan, this is what you really love. I mean, the singles are okay, but this is you're not a fan if you don't love these songs.
Exactly. This is them digging in, man. And if you don't think this showcases Bruce's talent, the very beginning, running low, and he holds it for 28 seconds or something crazy like that. It's like, listen to the power. And then he has the big scream, and then it heats up into a runner, and it's like the sound of your heart racing, because you're about to die, you're about to hang, man. So and the guitars are wicked, and look, live, man, scream for me, Long Beach. Scream for me, Long Beach. This is the song he always did it in, until they took it out of the set, and then he had to do it. I think he does it during Iron Maiden. He might do it a couple times during the night, which is fun. But yeah, I mean, this is unbelievable. Everybody kicking ass on this track.
Yeah. And I think it's what separates them. This is what separates the men from the boys here in the heavy metal rock and roll game. I can imagine the legions of people. You're talking about Cliff Burton before. Dave Mustaine was on the special that I saw. Just all of these kids who sat there and were like, maybe like teenagers, like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. I want to do this with the rest of my life. This doesn't sound like anything else. This isn't one of those cheesy bands from America that somehow is getting played. This is something that I think it just created this big community too. Like if you're a Maiden fan, it's kind of like that. You see somebody with a T-shirt, you give them, you know what's up, right?
Yeah. Although I must say, I was walking around yesterday, my neighborhood. Granted with a white beard and long hair, dark glasses, wearing a black Iron Maiden sweatshirt. And I think some of the more well-to-do people gave me a couple of dirty looks. Like, in this day and age, I'm like, hasn't Iron Maiden gotten big enough that they're it's okay to be Iron Maiden everywhere? I know in 1982, they were probably from dirty little punk kids or whatever, but haven't they earned their spot at this point, man?
Well, what I love is if you search it out, there's YouTube videos of people who are on planes in, wherever the airport is, and they spot the Iron Maiden plane, and they flew. There it is! Oh my God! So, I mean, come on, they fly around the world in a custom 777. They've made it beyond anything else that people could ever dream of. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool when you wear the shirt out in public.
Yeah, exactly. Damn it.
Yeah.
And they're good to you too. They send me a new shirt every year, although that might be changing. But so I have all these fan club shirts. I have some shirts from shows because I want the dates and the cities on the back. I had some anyway before. I bet I have more Iron Maiden t-shirts than I have anybody else. Yeah. So this, look, overall, fantastic album. It's regarded as like one of the top 5, heavy metal albums of all time. It's on all sorts of top 100, top 50, top 1,000 lists as a representative of metal, or, how great metal could be. And, is it their best album? I don't know. I accidentally listened to Peace of Mind because we're doing this, because it's the 40th anniversary, and that in March is its 40th anniversary. For whatever reason, I just got them screwed up in my head, so I listened to Peace of Mind first. I'm like, wow, this is really good, and this is when the classic bands back together. So we'll have to get to that one for sure. But is this the best? It doesn't hold the same place in my heart as some others, just because of when I got to them, like Live After Death and like Somewhere in Time and even Seventh Son. But it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's got just enough of the new stuff and just a little bit of the nod to the original Iron Maiden. Whereas the later albums would get farther and farther away from the kind of the straight ahead rockers. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great album. And for the first the second chapter, I guess, in the story, it's amazing that most of it holds up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, people change singers, and sometimes it's for the better. But this is hitting it out of the park. This is unbelievable. Paul Di'Anno basically just got Wally pipped, man. I mean, even though Bruce would eventually leave, the talent was different level kind of stuff, and just different person to be a partner with, to work with. I mean, what does Bruce not do well, right? He can fly any size airplane in the world. He's an international fencing champion or whatever. He's written books, fiction and nonfiction. He's run businesses. He's brewed beer. He can do anything. Paul wants to get drunk and fight. It's like how many years can you continue to do that? So having another grown-up on board doesn't mean you can't have fun. It just means, you got to get your work done. That's all. And right. Bruce Dickinson gets the work.
And it's interesting too, because seeing him on that one-man performance thing, you realize what an entertainer he really is, and that's what you needed. You needed somebody who could deliver on stage and in the studio, but also be this charismatic person to drive home, because it's not going to be Steve Harris. Steve Harris, like you said, he's a working man. Mm-hmm. He's probably one of the hardest working men in show business. Absolutely. But he's very reserved, very quiet. You need somebody that's going to say, look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm the best. This is the greatest band. Di'Anno was not that. And let's face it, kids, neither was Blaze Bayley. He came in there, he put out 2 records, but they said he was not ready for the commitment of fan
The prime
service
time
that he would have to do. Yeah, there's zero of that. And
Yeah.
Dickinson he is that guy, the only guy that could have done this.
Oh, he's got it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, Bruce Dickinson has it. Yeah. I did see them with Blaze. The first time I actually saw Iron Maiden was with Blaze. Me and Rob saw him at a club down in Jacksonville, Florida. And I was so psyched to see them because I'm like, they've played arenas, stadiums around the world. They could have said, all right, we don't have the power in America. Fine, let's just tour Europe. Let's just go to Japan. We'll just go to South America where we do big, huge shows. And Steve's like, no, fine. We'll go back and we'll do small clubs after the grunge thing had kind of changed this and Bruce had moved on. All right, we'll do that. And I thought it was cool as hell, And Blaze is a professional singer. He has a good voice. But it's not Bruce Dickinson. The coolest part of the night really was Yannick Gers pointed at us. And that was the greatest part of the night because we weren't in that big of a place. We kind of got on this it was like an island between us, almost like a bar, but no bar in there. And so it gave some space. And so Yannick looked at us and we both pointed at him at the same time. Yeah! And looked at him and he pointed his fingers back at us. Oh, yeah. And then he went back to playing. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't even know him. And now he's my favorite member of the band. That's so cool. Because he's relatively new at that point. He'd been in the band for 8 years or 7 years or whatever it was.
It's just a whole different, it's almost like a little world that you live in. And the fact that they've maintained this for so long. And like you said, they're still doing the fan club stuff. They're still sending T-shirts. They still send Christmas cards every year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's fan service above and beyond what you're going to get from anybody else.
That's right. Yeah. And they continue to put out great products across the board. And they continue to put out new music that kicks ass. Senjutsu's like album of the year on how many different charts last year. I feel like I can't even review it because I haven't digested it enough like I have these other Iron Maiden albums, right? I mean, how many times have I heard this one over the years versus Senjutsu? I need time to digest it. We may not be able to do that until it's 5 years old, Jackson.
We could do that. It might take that long to get through it. Like you said, but I mean, to come up with a new record that in a time when really no one's doing it, they're just touring on the catalog stuff, and to have a theme and to have another cool album cover to go totally different. They're not just rehashing stuff. It's amazing to me that they still, it proves that they still want to do this full time. They don't want to, this is what they do, not because, I mean, obviously they make money, but because they love to do it, not just for a paycheck.
Yeah.
And in looking at how this was going to evolve into, I mean, probably the biggest thing that they ever did was up to that point was the World Slavery Tour. To think they could do this night in, night out is it's insane to me. That especially that Bruce could sing like that over and over and over again. Nobody else sings, hey, we're going to let, somebody else take it. No, unless they're doing a solo, he is singing the song.
That's right. It's very, I wouldn't bet against Bruce Dickinson doing this until he was older, but he's in his early 60s now, and the whole band really is. Because they were, teenagers or early 20s in 1980 when they put their first record out. But now they're officially in their 60s. It's hard to be Bruce Dickinson, to cover that whole stage. Because the four guitar players, Steve and three guitar players, they can go hard in their one little area. They don't have to go all over the entire stage, right? It's different for not just the lead singer, but for Bruce's role in the band. To kick off the pyro, to kick off the props, the changing of the sets in the back, his own costume changes. For anyone who hasn't seen Iron Maiden, God, man, you got to see him, Gary. I mean, it makes me sad that you haven't.
It will happen on this tour. We've got to figure it out. They will come back. They'll either be here or they'll be in the UK, and we will figure it out. I would really prefer it to not be a festival deal because I kind of want to see the whole experience.
I don't want a festival either.
Yeah, but no, it's one of those. It has to happen.
I'm telling you. Yeah, you don't want a festival. You want a headline show and maybe even an evening with, because it's kind of tough sometimes to get.
Yeah.
Don't mess with their stage, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, we can have 3 feet on the front of this. Yeah. No thanks.
So that wraps our episode on Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, turning 40 this year, which, God, that makes you feel kind of old sometimes, but it also just kind of gives you some perspective of how long Iron Maiden has been in your life and how long they've been doing this at such a high level. I have great esteem for Iron Maiden, an amazing band that just keeps on chugging and keeps on putting out quality product on all levels for their fans. Just that working class attitude that Steve Harris has carried them forward all these years. And Number of the Beast introduced one of the most dynamic and amazing lead singers of all time in Bruce Dickinson. And I'm glad that Jackson got to see him live in his speaking word performance, as I did at Shepherd's Bush this past fall. But we've got to get Jackson in front of him, right? We've got to get Jackson to an Iron Maiden show. So if anybody out there has ideas, or as hopefully some new shows are added for this year and probably for 2023, it's not too early for them to start thinking about 2023. Maybe we'll have that happen. And of course, we'll be all about reviewing that here on the show. So as usual, folks, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite port? Tell us. You got to tweet us or DM us at ActionJack72 or at ugly_werewolf. And let us know the kinds of records and bands and concerts and DVDs that you want us to review. And if you enjoyed the show, hey, do us a favor. Go out and give us a nice review someplace. It just helps us find more rock fans like you, and it helps us grow the show and hopefully bring some more resources to the show. We've got a couple things on tap that I think you're really going to like. So whether it's Good Pods, which is a great place to find new independent podcasts and interact with the creators of them, or it's the more traditional ones like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google Play, even on YouTube, give us a review. And if we see it or you send it to us, we might just read it on the show. Now, next week, we're going to continue our Iron Maiden theme because the first bookend is the original Bruce Dickinson's album with Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast. We're going to go 10 years later to Fear the Dark, which will be the last album to feature Bruce for a while, as he left the band and Adrian already had. Fear the Dark is kind of the bookend there, and it turns 30 this year. It came out while we were in college together, and so we're going to review that one next week. So until then, rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.